Thank you very much. Oleg Shakirov.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I don't know if I will sound mildly provocative or just common sense, but bear with me. I'm going to talk about what I call protracted disruption. This is a little bit different from what people talk about in this conference, but maybe not that different. Okay, let's begin. So in this town, there is a very specific way how people imagine cyber conflicts. Maybe not everyone, but many people imagine some kind of a catastrophic scenario where the United States will get involved in a war or some military conflict with China, and China will be able to use its cyber capabilities to cause some chaos, to gain an upper hand in this very important strategic moment, even by disrupting U.S. Military operation or just causing wreaking havoc on U.S. Critical infrastructure. And there are a bunch of publications to that effect. One other aspect of this is that presumably China already has implemented some malicious code into US critical infrastructure systems. So this idea is not really that new. Since the 1990s, people have been talking about or speculating about the possibility of cyber Pearl Harbor. Then since the Al-Qaeda attacks on New York and DC, people speculated about the possibility of cyber 9/11, etc. So there are multiple versions of these catastrophic scenarios, and I think they're very prevalent because they capture our imagination and they help explain these very intricate ideas about cybersecurity to everyone. I will probably not argue against the possibility of such a scenario happening, but I would like to refocus your attention and make you think about some of the possibilities of how a disruption could happen. And for that purpose, I would like to look at the Russia-Ukraine war, and specifically the cyber conflict that is of Russia-Ukraine war. Some people might say that it's not very relevant because it's a very different conflict, to which I would partially agree because every conflict is different. But I would argue that this is very relevant for several reasons. So first of all, it's the longest cyber conflict that we know. It has been going on for more than 4 years or even more than 12 years, depending on where you take your starting point. Second, both Russia and Ukraine are very capable cyber powers with a lot of talent, a lot of expertise. People in this room might be more familiar with Russia as a cyber actor, but Ukraine has its own capabilities. It has also experienced it benefited from cooperation with the West. Russia is a bigger country, so it has a bigger attack surface. So I would argue that in cyberspace, not in every domain, but in cyberspace, Russia and Ukraine are peer competitors. Well, or if there is an asymmetry, it's not that great. This is even further exacerbated by the fact that countries they essentially adopted a laissez-faire approach to non-state groups, and together this increases the intensity of cyber attacks. So both Russia and Ukraine are being attacked all the times. There are a lot of incidents, and so it's obviously a very tragic development for Russia and for Ukraine, but for scholars of cybersecurity and cyber conflict, this is something that we should probably look for because it offers a lot of insights. Obviously, during the war, there are also virtually no limitations on what each country does. When you have missiles and drones flying in both sides, it's very hard to argue that hackers and cyber actors need to adopt some kind of restraint. So, to put it simple, if Ukraine wanted to do something to Russia in cyberspace, or Russia wanted to do something to Ukraine in cyberspace, they would probably not hold back during the conflict, which is very different for peacetime. Finally, before the war, there were very specific predictions about these catastrophic attacks, that Russia would launch catastrophic attacks on Ukraine and even broader on the West. So these catastrophic scenarios did not really play out. There were just descriptions of maybe not the same as people talk about China and the United States, but some people said that Russia would also disrupt energy, water systems, etc., all across the West, again, to gain advantage in this very specific point of time when the conflict starts. Second, there were several disruptive attacks that resemble very closely these most anticipated incidents that we associated with the catastrophic cyber scenario, but their impact was not that damaging. It was much more isolated. So the famous Viasat hack, which was launched at the onset of the conflict and was aimed at disrupting Ukrainian military communications, it did so, but it did not deny Ukraine communications completely. There were several attacks on energy infrastructure, but they were usually isolated within individual cities or regions, and they did not last long. But that doesn't mean that there were no disruptions. In fact, the war is still ongoing. We still see a lot of cyber attacks, and there are a lot of disruptions. But these are disruptions of different nature, I would say. These are not the catastrophic disruptions that proponents of this catastrophic scenario expect. So I suggest that we rethink disruptions, or maybe we broaden our perspective. And my suggestion is that we distinguish between the kind of catastrophic disruption and protracted disruption. Again, this is like simple metaphor because it's a protracted conflict. We see protracted disruption that happens all the time. They are similar in some aspects, but there are several characteristics that make these two types of disruption different. So as I already described in these multiple scenarios of catastrophic disruption, it usually happens and is coordinated with the onset of the conflict. The attacker usually gains access to, I mean, it is presumed that the attacker would gain access to targeted systems in advance, and it would preposition malware in these systems. These targets would be of military significance. For example, military command and communication systems, energy infrastructure, military logistics, defense industrial base, etc. And the impact will be concentrated enough to allow the attacker to gain strategic advantage in this very specific point in time. Protracted disruption is a bit different. So assume that the war continues for some time. There is no end in sight. The goal of disruption becomes very different. It's not to gain an advantage in one specific point in time. It's about inflicting more damage on your opponent, about kind of attrition in some way, and imposing more costs on the other side. So it's ongoing throughout the whole the conflict. Access is gained not in advance. I mean, maybe some access can be gained in advance, but access is gained throughout the conflict again. And sometimes it's a bit arbitrary. So threat actors would probe all kinds of systems. They would find weak spots, and they would exploit these systems. They would not necessarily know that they need to go only after specific high value strategically significant targets. They would go after more, after broader spectrums of systems. And the disruption could be caused when they target systems that underpin the economy or society in general. I will talk about this more in detail later. And the impact of this kind of disruption, it's not the same as catastrophic disruption. It's not like one single catastrophe that the victim cannot recover from. It's just multiple disruptions with diffuse effects, cumulative costs that are shared by multiple organizations and multiple individuals. So there are some reasons to think about catastrophic disruptions, about worst case scenarios. It helps us focus attention, mobilize resources. It helps convey this image of something bad happening and mobilizing you to respond to this. But it comes with a cost. There are several disadvantages. The first of them is that you're actually telling people to prepare for the least likely scenario, which could come at a cost of not being prepared for the most likely incidents. And in a protracted, especially in a protracted cyber conflict, organizations will face a lot of incidents, and most of them will not be as catastrophic and as disruptive as proponents of catastrophic scenario would say. This catastrophic narrative also instills fear, could instill fear, which is not really helpful for clear strategic thinking. So I would not tell you not to think about worst case scenarios. It is useful. It is how a lot of people, especially in defense and intelligence, approach things. That's how they work. But I would like you to think about these two different types of disruption, and the protracted disruption can be more likely if it's a protracted conflict. Okay, so enough with this kind of introduction and theory. Let's talk about like what can be disrupted, what can become the source of protracted disruption. In the following slides, I will focus on several examples, taken both from Russia and from Ukraine. I will probably have more examples from Russia, but this does not suggest that there are more incidents like that in Russia. This is just my personal bias as a researcher. I have been focusing more on what's happening in Russia, how Russia responds to these attacks, but I'm trying to expand my perspective. Okay, first, of course, it's telecommunications. When people think about some catastrophic scenarios, they of course think about communications, but in a very specific way. They think about military communications, right? But civilian communications are no less important. It's hard to overstate how much modern businesses depend on internet connectivity, and also it can have the disruption of internet connectivity can have a lot of cascading effects that are hard to predict. You can see on the slide there are two specific examples. One is probably better known to everyone here. In December 2023, the largest Ukrainian telecom provider, Kyivstar, was attacked by Viper malware. A couple of dozen clients of this telecom provider across the whole country lost access to both voice and data services, and it took several days first to restore phone services like voice services, but then several more days to restore internet services. And it had a lot of impact not only on individuals, but also on businesses. For example, many ATMs and payment terminals were dependent on Kyivstar services, and even some emergency services too. Last year in Russia, one of the biggest incidents in Russia also affected an internet provider. It's called Orion Telecom. It's a much smaller organization based in Siberia, but it's crucial for that region. And when this organization was attacked, clients of this provider in 4 regions in Russia lost access to internet. Also, the company was much slower to respond. It took them for up to 2 weeks to restore connectivity. Also, interestingly enough, it is one of the main providers of the internet to several closed military towns in Siberia, and they also lost connections, and they did not have many options for internet services. So second kind of more or less obvious sector is transportation. Again, when people think about militarily significant disruption, it's about military logistics, about what can be, how troops can be delivered to the theater, etc. But civilian transportation is also very important, and it affects a lot of people in a very obvious way. Last year, there were 2 major incidents, both in Ukraine and in Russia, affecting, oh, sorry, I think it's something, maybe not. Oh, it's right. There were two incidents in Russia and Ukraine affecting railways in Ukraine and a major airline in Russia. So Ukraine doesn't, because of the war, Ukraine has no airline services, and railways are one of the most important means of transportation. So when the Ukrainian railways were hit by the cyber attack, they had to stop some of their online sales and switch to pen and paper tickets. So they had some redundancy, right? So they were able to carry out their services, and as far as I know, no trains were canceled. Quite similar situation happened to the Russian airline company. It was more serious in a way that Aeroflot, which is the biggest Russian airline company, had to cancel half of their flights on the day of the attack, but the next day they already restored all of the flights. It probably took them longer to recover completely, but they were able to restore this main function that they were able to carry out flights. They also relied on several other airlines by transferring passengers to other planes that were not canceled. Okay, let's talk briefly about government systems. There are all types of government systems, but one of the potential natural points of failure is centralized procurement systems. They make procurement more transparent, easier to trace, and easier for everyone involved. But if compromised, this can become bottleneck, and this can cause delays across multiple contracts. There were two incidents that I know of. One was not very successful in Ukraine, but maybe it could have been more damaging if the attackers achieved their goal. So in January 2022, before the war, there was a large-scale attack on several Ukrainian government websites, and a few days later, there was a specific attack on this one system. It's called Prozoro. It's a electronic procurement system. However, unlike with other government systems, it was not wiped clean. It was only defaced. So the system itself was not affected, and everything went smoothly. But it could have gone much worse, which happened in Russia in 2025, 3 years later. One of the biggest government procurement platforms, Roseltorg, which translates as Russian Electronic Trade, was attacked in early January, and it had to recover its main functionality within about a week, and it continued to recover later in the month. But ultimately, it caused a lot of delays across many regions in Russia. For instance, in one example, a regional government reported that it had delays in supplies of medicines because of the disruption of that particular system. So this is just one type of government systems, but there are, of course, many more government systems, and they enable all kinds of services. You can have a government system that is only being used by the government and no one cares about it. But sometimes governments introduce themselves into these long, let's say, supply chains of processes or procedures, and the sabotage of these systems can have ripple effects across industries. Several examples here. One of my earliest one of the earliest examples that I found out was the DDoS attack on the system in Russia that is used to track and trace alcohol products. So it's not. It sounds very not big of a deal. But if you produce alcohol, beer, or vodka, because it's Russian, or I don't know, maybe some medicines. So anything with alcohol, you cannot do anything without using this system. So even a simple, well, not that simple, but a protracted DDoS attack on that system made it inoperable. And so a lot of organizations couldn't use it for all kinds of operations. So several major beer factories in Russia had to halt operations, not because they had their equipment sabotaged, but because they had a lot of boxes of beer and they could not ship them. So they had to just stop operations and wait before this system came back online. In 2023, Russian Customs Service suffered a I think it was a Viper attack, but it was never publicly disclosed. It affected one of the systems that it's used for electronic declarations for when you cross the border. And for a couple of days, maybe longer, but certainly for like 2.5 days, Russian border crossings all across Russian border were had to process these declaration requests with pen and paper. It became much slower. Here you can see the line from, I think it's the border between Russia and Estonia. Again, this was maybe not your classical disruption that you expect, like something like water leaking or something exploding, but the damage was quite big. It was just not concentrated in one single place. It was spread across many people who were carrying products inside Russia or exporting something, many people who had to come from abroad, etc. And maybe the biggest example that we know of was happened in Ukraine in December 2024. So Ukrainian state registers were attacked, and so these are registers that are used in all kinds of government services. So, for example, if you want to like to build a house, or if you want to, sorry, I cannot. I did not look up for specific examples, but these are the government services. They rely on these government registers, and these government services were not themselves disrupted, but because the system that they rely on was not available for a couple of weeks, maybe nearly for a month, some services were not available. Again, this was not like catastrophic, but it was very disruptive, and it imposed a lot of costs on the Ukrainian economy. So finally, let's briefly talk about supply chain. Supply chain, there are many versions of how you can talk about supply chains, but I would just like to emphasize the simple idea that the attackers do not necessarily have to sabotage equipment to cause some disruptions. They can actually target any part of supply chain. For example, last year in Ukraine, there was in January, there was an attack on one of the biggest agricultural companies called MHP. And it couldn't, it inhibited their capacity to ship products. Later that year, ESET reported that there were more cyber attacks on Ukraine's agricultural and grain sector. And they said that it could be plausibly explained by the fact that the attacker wanted to weaken the country's economy because Ukraine depends on grain exports. Another example this year, in March, a ransomware attack hit a very little known factory that even in Russia, I don't know how to properly pronounce its name. And no one knows much about this. This is a factory in the south of Russia. But what's important is that it's one of the major suppliers of Rosatom, Russian nuclear power energy company. So, of course, it's hard to know what are the consequences, but it's easy to imagine that it could cause a lot of delays across the whole chain. Okay. I think I'm actually on time. So let's talk about some lessons learned from this protracted conflict or protracted disruption. And actually, I would like to give credit to Christopher Cruz, who spoke here before, because I think some of my observations from the outside rhyme with a lot of what he said. So in general, there are a lot of interconnected systems that our societies rely on, and there are so many ways to disrupt them that go far beyond what people imagine when they think about kind of direct disruption, power outages, or internet disconnections, etc. Conflict, especially a protracted conflict, generates a lot of cyber activity. And a lot of these attacks are not disruptive. They can be isolated to one specific organization, and others might not feel any consequences. But because of sheer volume, some of these attacks will almost inevitably be disruptive. I think this is one of the most important points. It was also mentioned here by several speakers. I think it's unrealistic to expect that during a conflict, many organizations will be prepared to repel every attack. It's a simple idea. You can be expected to put a lock on your door and dissuade a burglar from stealing something from you, but you cannot reasonably be expected to be able to defend against mercenaries or guerrillas during a conflict. So the damage caused, I already mentioned that the impact is diffuse, and the damage caused by this protracted disruption, it's also diffuse. It's spread across many organizations, which makes it very difficult to assess. But we should not neglect it because it is burden that is borne by a lot of organizations. So, for example, go back to this example of Russian Customs Service. You can probably organize a commission that will try to estimate the impact, and no one will do this right now. But many individuals who export or import stuff, they can tell you a lot of examples where they suffered the consequences. Finally, again, the idea that resonates with what was said here is that resilience depends not only on prevention of the attacks, but on the recovery. So if during the protracted conflict, you are almost guaranteed to be attacked and successfully, it's not only about how effectively you can prevent such attacks, it's also about how fast you can come back online. And I have several maybe non-nonsense recommendations. First, it's build resilience. There are a lot of ways to do it. If you look at what how Ukrainian organizations or Russian organizations to respond, they always rely on some redundancy measures. Just they have to switch to old ways usually. And it's easier if you can already do it, if you have prepared for it. You can also practice recovery, and you can practice recovery not within your own perimeter, but looking beyond your own perimeter. So if you suffer an attack, a disruption, how fast can you recover? How fast can you help others who depend on you recover? Second, it's important to defend together because these disruptions happen because of attacks that target these systems, and systems connect a lot of organizations together. So it's again, it's unrealistic to expect each individual organization to be capable of successfully defending by itself. So there needs to be more coordination across sectors, more information sharing, etc. Obvious things. Finally, again, simple recommendation: avoid protracted cyber conflict if possible. This is not, unfortunately, this is not a universally applicable recommendation. If you suffer an attack, you cannot avoid it. But if you willfully start a conflict, you can think that you'll probably also not be able to defend yourself. Russia was very ill prepared for this cyber conflict, and it still pays the cost, even though it probably thought that it could be much more capable and defendable country than Ukraine. But right now, as I said in the beginning, I think both countries inflict a lot of damage on each other. And hopefully this will end better soon than later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We have time for one question. Who's got, we got a question up here.
Thank you for this amazing presentation. First of all, I want to a little bit add that we need to remember that not Ukraine invaded to Russia and Russia invaded to Ukraine. And it's not a conflict. It's right now in the cyber is a real war. I can explain why. When Russians try to suppress a critical object or critical infrastructure in Ukraine in the cyber, and in case if they failed, they launch rockets to this object of critical infrastructure. And this cyber war indeed started in 2014 when the Russians penetrated Ukrainian election system. And you put in your examples things absolutely not comparable. I also can explain why. First of all, cyber attack on telecom systems in Ukraine and Russia Federation. In Ukraine, Kyivstars, when it was penetrated, more than 2 million of people of Ukraine stay without internet connection and without GSM connection. More than 2 million people in eastern part of Ukraine, close to border of Russia Federation. And the people depend on internet because air alarm system was dependent on internet, and in those during 1 week, people stay without possibility to go to shelter when rockets was launched. Orion telecom operator somewhere in Siberia, nobody knows where is it. About the attack on transportation system, you mentioned that Ukraine right now absolutely dependent on railway. It's absolutely true because all support, all assistance from the Europe come to Ukraine by the railway. And when it was disrupted railway station, railway system, it also was a huge impact on our critical infrastructure in Ukraine. And what happened when it was attacked on air flood? Just people don't have possibility to go for holiday to somewhere. And also your last example about the transportation system, about MHP. It's not only the production that deliver products somewhere in Europe. It's a really huge production of products or foods in Ukraine, and also people in Ukraine depend on this production. And my question is, what do you think we need to do in the case just to prevent and to stop this negative activity in cyber? And what the lesson learned could be for the United States from this war? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for clarifications. I mean, it's a short presentation, so I didn't include all the details, but you're right. So about the prevention, I think it's the main takeaway is that it's inevitable that cyber conflict is part of any conflict, any war right now, and it's really difficult to prevent it. If we look at how we can reduce this activity, I think it's very much connected to how long the conflict goes on, the war goes on. So I was fantasizing about whether there could be a separate cyber ceasefire or not. I think it's impossible to think about it separately from the war in general. So if there is an end to the war, there could be end to the kind of cyber dimension of the war. If not, then not. Lessons for the United States. I mean, if there is a U.S.-China conflict or war or some kind of trouble, almost inevitable there will be cyber implications of that. And I think people sometimes they underestimate how much damage it can cause, not only to these most strategically important systems, but to everyone. And also, I think people overestimate how much you can prepare for it. Today, I think we heard a lot of examples of organizations being ill-prepared, and I think you have to. I mean, I don't want to say that you should not prepare, but I think it's better to expect that these organizations will not be prepared if something happens. And so, how do you deal with it? That's maybe the most important takeaway. So you have to think about. We enter a conflict where no one is prepared. Like, how do you mitigate it?
Please join me in thanking Oleg Shakirov.